Welcome to Psychology, the DAF. We are on Gemara Shabbos, DAF Kuf Nun Beis, and in this Gemara, Rav Shimon ben Chalafta tells us, he actually tells Rabbi Hanasi a very cryptic message as to why he's old, and gives a number of different metaphors for being old. And one of them that he says is that the Mesim Shalom Babayas Batel, the peacemaker in his home, is no longer functioning. Rashi tells us, Mesim Shalom Babayas Aver Tashmish. The peacemaker in the house is the male sexual organ. And today, in this year, I want to talk about a couple of sexual function concerns. And this is YouTube. So I'm assuming if you're on YouTube, you've seen and heard a lot worse than a shiur talking to you about Torah ideas about sexuality. But in case you haven't gotten the memo, and in case you haven't realized that YouTube is a dangerous place, and for some reason you're going to be shocked at my content, I suggest that you stop listening right now. In any case, like anything in life, one cannot just automatically assume that one gets the benefit from doing things. You could put tefillin on your head, but without the right kavanas, you're not going to get much benefit. While it's true, Chazal have a lot to say when they say that the Aver Tashmish, when they say that the male sexual organ is a peacemaker, they have a lot to say about that, and they're saying a lot in a short amount of words. But it's not automatically a peacemaker. First of all, obviously, there are plenty of women that, for different reasons, due to sexual trauma, due to not feeling loved or respected enough, due to perhaps initial introductions to sexuality in marriage or over time that felt forced and unpleasant, painful even. There are many women that do not enjoy sex, and that is not normal. Now, listen up. Do not tell the person that you're with that they're not normal. That's not the point. I'm trying to say that sexuality is an instinct and a desire and a drive, both with men and women. Although they might be expressed differently at times, it is fulfilling to both, and it is a drive and a desire for both. And if one or another partner is not able to experience sexual desire or interested in sexuality at almost any age, it is a problem that requires a solution. It's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to be sexual even if you don't have children. It is a avera to be sexual if the other person doesn't want to be sexual. So we both need to figure out what's getting in the way that it feels like a pleasant, enjoyable, and even desired experience. And there are all kinds of things that can get in the way of that. Aside from whether or not a woman experienced sexual trauma, even in the beginning of marriage with painful intercourse or other things, or doesn't feel respected, or feels like she's just being used, the act of sexuality itself is not an automatic win. It does not automatically give a woman pleasure. As you may know, a woman needs to have an orgasm, and sometimes, especially with couples who don't know about sexuality or are learning about sexuality, and that learning process can take many years to be able to communicate openly and understand what kinds of touches work and what kind of touches do not work, and how and when. This is a important process, and that sometimes the woman gives up and just says, it's okay, whatever feels good for you, which is not good. That's not sex. That doesn't feel good, and it leads to more and more distance emotionally and physically. There needs to be a solution, but the solution is not to pressure the woman into feeling like she should have an orgasm. That's not going to help. There needs to be real love and patience and understanding and communication. The rabbis valued an orgasm. The Gemara Niddah on DAF Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph through Lamed Aleph Amud Beis actually spells out that there's a great reward awaiting for men who can cause the women to give forth seed. Now, the rabbis were not biologists, so they are thinking, when they're using the word give forth seed, they're using an idiom to express something that looks similar to a man when he has an orgasm. So a man, when he has an orgasm, gives forth seed. So the rabbis assume that a woman at the height of her pleasure was somehow contributing her part. Now, biologically, it's not completely false, because when a woman experiences sexual arousal, she releases certain types of fluids in her vagina, which actually reduces the acidity of the vaginal tract and allows the semen to move more quickly and stay healthy. So actually, a woman's orgasm, a woman's sexual pleasure definitely aids in the process of sexuality and fertility. But the point is that the rabbis were clearly referring to an orgasm and pleasure. If you look at Rashi, Yivol v'yishne, it's clear that Rashi understands that the act of what Chazal call the woman giving forth seed is a pleasurable act. And sometimes, as the rabbis noted, a man has difficulty in being able to hold and delay his ejaculation in order to allow a woman to experience pleasure. Now, simply, there are other ways to give a woman an orgasm, and fortunately, although a man's sexual organ can lose its erection, hands and other parts of the body are still able to function, and that's important. But also, there is something very satisfying about a orgasm that's experienced through intercourse, through actual contact and entry. And there are many ways and many techniques that people can learn. It is a misconception, a distortion, to think that a man cannot control his ejaculation. Every man can control his ejaculation almost indefinitely. And that's surprising. You might not realize that, because nobody taught you that you can do that. Imagine if you lived in a world where nobody was toilet trained, and everybody, whenever they felt the urge to urinate, urinated. And all of a sudden, the Albert Einstein of bodily processes discovered that with careful learning and careful and mindful paying attention to his body functions, he could feel when his bladder is full, he could exercise control over his sphincter, and learn how to hold his urine. Wow, he's the Albert Einstein of urination. Well, the truth is, to a large extent, the ability to control an ejaculation involves learning to understand and feel and relate to different inner biological processes. I'm not going to be able to teach you this in one video, although you are welcome to look at my YouTube channel my YouTube playlist called the Chassan and Kala Shmuz You Wish You Had But Never Got, where I give more extensive instruction, although some of this sometimes requires sex therapy. But what I can assure you is that over the years, many women do end up feeling frustrated and angry by not being able to have an orgasm, and sometimes they feel frustrated and angry by not being able to have intercourse that's long enough. And long enough means as long as it takes for it to feel good and satisfying. And so this is a very important aspect of Mesim Shalom Babayis, of the Peacemaker. There is something very powerful about a man and woman having intercourse, giving each other pleasure, that despite all the other problems or difficulties or pains they may have, they still can feel very bonded and close. And there is such a thing as make-up sex. Now, is it pathological to fight all the time and then use sex to make up? Sure it is. Is it pathological to use sex to cover up other problems and never deal with those problems? Sure it is. Is it pathological to assume automatically that having sex with your spouse is going to make them feel better when they're feeling hurt or unhappy? Sure it is. Don't be simple about this. However, do not underestimate the importance of sexuality for a great marriage. It's God's glue between a couple at any age, and that if there is a lack of desire on one person's part or another, it represents a symptom of a problem. It is not the problem, it's the symptom of a problem. There is a distance, there is trauma, there's hurt feelings, there's misunderstanding, there's years of disappointment and sexual frustration and sexual inadequacy. Whatever the case may be, it needs to be solved, because it is a wonderful tool. And the rabbis were very wise to consider it the peacemaker. And they were very wise to let us know that it's a mitzvah and it's an obligation to be sexual between husband and wife. But it's an obligation not to do it in a way, of course, that that ends up forcing the person into it or feeling coerced emotionally and psychologically. That's not going to help anybody. So it needs to be done in a balance with love and care and patience, and to know that this is a very important tool, like any other tool in a relationship, that should never be ignored, and on the other hand, should never be misused.